My family skipped the biggest night of my life. Funny how quiet it got after. So yeah, the night my dream finally came true, my family ghosted me. Sounds dramatic, right? But imagine working your whole damn life for one night, just one, and the people you love most decide it's not worth showing up for. That was my reality. I'm Emma Rivers, 32, chef, owner of a tiny restaurant on the Oregon coast called the Harbor Table. You'd think that after 6 years of double shifts, saving every nickel, and surviving on instant ramen, my family would be, I don't know, proud? They weren't. My mom said cooking was cute for a hobby. My dad said I'd never make rent off mashed potatoes. And my brother Luke, he just laughed, said, "Good luck playing restaurant, Em." I kept telling myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their approval. But that night, when I stood under the warm lights of my own place, holding a wine glass with shaky hands, I wanted them there, just once. The dining room smelled like roasted garlic and fresh bread. The candles flickered against the windows, and for a moment, everything felt like a dream. My staff, kids barely in their 20s, were nervous but smiling. We'd made it. I'd made it. And then I looked over at the corner table, the one I'd saved for my family. 3 seats, polished silverware, their names on little cards, Mom, Dad, Luke. Empty. I told the hostess not to give that table away. "They're just running late," I said. I kept saying that, over and over, like a prayer. But as the night went on, that corner started to feel haunted. Every time the door chimed, my heart jumped. Every time it wasn't them, it dropped a little lower. By 8, the candles had burned halfway down. The other tables were full of laughter and clinking glasses. Strangers celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, first dates. My table, my family's table, sat untouched. A still life of disappointment. My sous chef leaned over and whispered, "Should we clear it, chef?" I shook my head. "No, leave it. They'll come." They didn't. When the last dessert went out, I slipped into the back alley behind the restaurant. The night air cold enough to sting. I leaned against the brick wall and laughed. That weird kind of laugh you do when you realize you're the only one still pretending. I thought about all the times my dad said, "Family sticks together," right before skipping my college graduation because Luke had a baseball game. I thought about how Mom posted every one of Luke's work awards on Facebook, but forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. And now, here I was, opening a restaurant they said would never happen. And they couldn't even bother to send a text. At 9:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Luke. "Sorry, Em, we started poker night late. How'd it go?" I stared at it for a full minute. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, typing and deleting. What could I say? "It went great, thanks for caring." Or maybe, "Don't worry, you didn't miss much. Just the best night of my life." Instead, I just put my phone down and walked back inside. That's when I saw him. A man sitting alone near the bar. Late 50s maybe. Gray coat, neat beard, quiet eyes that didn't look away when everyone else did. He ordered a glass of white wine and the halibut special. When he finished, he stood, smiled, and said, "You cooked that yourself?" I nodded. He handed me a card. "Elliot Hayes, Hayes Hospitality Group. Call me tomorrow, Miss Rivers. I think your story's just getting started." He left before I could respond. The door closed with this soft click that sounded final, like the end of one chapter, maybe the start of another. That night, I went home to my tiny apartment above the bakery. Still in my chef's coat, hair smelling like butter and smoke. I sat on the floor, back against the counter, and just stared at the phone. Missed calls, 14 from Mom, 8 from Dad. No voicemails, no apologies, just silence. It hit me then. Family doesn't forget big moments by accident. They miss them because your success reminds them of everything they'll never be. So yeah, that night I learned something no college or kitchen ever taught me. You don't need people to clap for you when you're winning. Sometimes the loudest kind of love is the one that stays quiet and still shows up, even if it's just you. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of burnt coffee and regret. My phone was still lighting up with messages. All from the people who couldn't bother to show up the night before. "Sorry we missed it. Poker ran long. You know how your dad gets on Fridays." Yeah, I knew. I also knew that if Luke had opened a lemonade stand, they'd have shut down the whole street just to cut a ribbon. But for me, a simple good luck text was apparently too heavy to type. I didn't reply. Instead, I called the number on the business card Elliot Hayes had given me. I figured, what's the worst that could happen? He'd say no. But the thing is, I'd already heard worse from my own family. He answered on the second ring. Emma Rivers, he said like he already knew me. I meant what I said last night. You've got something rare. How attached are you to staying small? That question hit me right in the chest. I looked around my tiny kitchen. Thrift store pots, a stove that clicked twice before lighting, the faint smell of lemon and exhaustion. I said, "Depends on what you mean by small." He laughed. "I mean, do you want to be a chef with a restaurant? Or a brand with a story?" That was the start of everything. Within a month, Elliot became my mentor and silent investor. He didn't just throw money at me. He taught me things my own parents never did. How to negotiate, how to hold my ground, how to be respected in rooms where no one expected me to belong. He said, "People underestimate nice women. Let them. Just make sure they choke on their surprise later." Meanwhile, word started to spread around town. The Harbor Table got featured in a local food blog. Then a Portland magazine picked it up. Suddenly, everyone who'd once called it Emma's Little Restaurant started calling it our hometown gem. And just like that, my family remembered I existed. Mom started showing up, not to eat, but to check in. Just seeing how my baby's doing. She'd bring Luke along sometimes. He'd swagger through the kitchen like he owned the place, patting staff on the shoulder and saying things like, "I told her to go for it." I'd bite my tongue so hard it almost bled. One evening, he actually introduced himself to a customer as one of the co-founders. I pulled him aside after service, keeping my voice steady. "Don't do that again," he smirked. "Relax, Em. People love a family story. Makes you more relatable." "Yeah," I said. "Funny how relatable I was when you didn't show up." He rolled his eyes. "You still on about that?" That was the moment I realized. They weren't sorry. They were jealous. My success didn't make them proud. It made them uncomfortable. Because it proved everything they said about me was wrong. The next few months were wild. Elliot helped me expand the patio, build a new menu, even start bottling our homemade sauce. My staff became like family, the kind you actually choose. And my real family? They kept showing up just enough to take credit. Mom started telling people I'd always been creative, like she hadn't begged me to quit culinary school. Dad bragged about my business sense while still asking for money to cover Luke's car payments. And Luke, he started dropping lines like, "We're in talks with investors." That word started to rot something inside me. But here's the thing about revenge. The best kind doesn't start with anger. It starts with realization. That moment when you see people for exactly who they are and decide you'll never let them take another piece of you again. So I played along, smiled, let them think I was still that desperate kid craving approval. I let Mom take her proud mother photos, let Luke post them with hashtags like #FamilyBusiness, just to stroke his own ego. Because I knew something they didn't. Elliot was about to make me an offer that would change everything. One rainy Tuesday, we met at this coffee shop by the pier. He showed me a proposal on his tablet. Expansion plans, investors, my name printed bold across the top. The Harbor Table Group, founder and executive chef, Emma Rivers. He looked up and said, "This could be big, but you need to know one thing. Once you sign this, the restaurant won't just be your kitchen anymore, it'll be your legacy." Legacy. That word echoed for days. It wasn't about money, it was about who gets written into the story and who gets left out. That night, I sat in the dark dining room of my restaurant, the same one where those empty chairs had been. I imagined my family sitting there, laughing like they'd earned a seat. Then I pictured all the nights I worked through injuries, the burns on my hands, the bills they never helped with. I whispered, "You missed it. Not just the launch, the years before it. The woman I became while they weren't looking." And for the first time, that realization didn't hurt. It felt powerful, because maybe that's what growth really is. Not proving people wrong, but outgrowing the need to. 2 weeks after I signed the deal with Elliot, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was sweet, too sweet, like sugar melting over poison. "Sweetheart," she said, "we should all get together, a family dinner. It's been too long." "Too long? Yeah, try." "Since you ghosted me on the biggest night of my life. But sure, Mom, let's call it too long." I almost said no. I wanted to hang up, pretend I was too busy. But then I thought about what Elliot told me once. Sometimes, closure doesn't come knocking. You have to set the table yourself. So I smiled and said, "Actually, that's a great idea. Let's have it here, at the Harbor Table, my treat." She squealed, "Oh, that'll be lovely. I'll tell Luke." Perfect. Tell Luke. The next few days, I planned every detail, not out of love, but out of precision. I told my manager to close the restaurant for a private event, dim the lights, polish the silverware. I wanted it elegant, almost cinematic, the kind of setting where truth feels heavier. When they arrived that Saturday night, Mom wore pearls like she was meeting the queen. Dad had his "I'm proud but pretending not to be impressed" face on. Luke? He strutted in with that smug grin that said, "I belong here." He even gave the hostess a wink and said, "Family business night, huh?" I greeted them at the door, kissed my mom's cheek, shook Dad's hand, and smiled at Luke like I hadn't fantasized about throwing him into the ocean at least twice that week. We sat at the same corner table, the one that used to be empty on my opening night. The irony wasn't lost on me. I poured the wine, took a deep breath, and said, "I wanted tonight to be special, to celebrate how far we've come." Mom beamed. "Oh, honey, we're so proud of you. Everyone's talking about the restaurant. Your father even showed your article to the guys at the club." Dad nodded like that meant something. "Told them my daughter's an entrepreneur now." Luke leaned back. "Our little family brand's really taking off, huh?" There it was, our. Like he'd done a damn thing besides breathing my air. I just smiled. "You're right, Luke. It's definitely taking off." Dinner started. I kept my tone light, like a hostess entertaining VIP guests. I asked about their week, their plans, their poker nights. Oh, the irony. They talked and talked, soaking in the spotlight like they owned it. Every time someone from my staff passed by, Luke made sure to say, "That's my sister, the chef," like he was the proud big brother from a Hallmark movie. But my staff knew. They'd seen the table that night, the ghost chairs, the phone that never rang. They looked at me sometimes, just a flicker of recognition, and I'd give the smallest nod. "I've got this." When dessert came out, our signature creme brulee, I stood up. My heart was beating like a drumline in my chest, but my voice stayed calm. "I have an announcement," I said. "It's kinda big." Mom gasped. "Are you engaged?" Luke laughed. "Or expanding?" I told people we might open a second location. I smiled. "Close." Then I pulled out a folder from my bag. Sleek black leather with the Harbor Table Group embossed in gold. I placed it on the table. "This," I said, "is the finalized ownership contract for the brand." Dad leaned forward. "Brand?" "Yeah," I said. "The Harbor Table is expanding. Elliot Hayes offered a major investment, and we're opening 2 new locations, Seattle and Portland." Mom clapped her hands. "That's incredible, honey. We should plan a family photo for the announcement. People love stories about strong family businesses." Luke grinned. "Damn right. Let me see that contract. I'll post something about it later." I didn't hand it over. Instead, I looked straight at him and said, very softly, "You can post it, but make sure you tag the right people, because I'm the only name on it." He froze. "What?" Mom laughed nervously. "Oh, don't be silly. You know what she means." "No," I said, still calm. "I mean exactly what I said. The Harbor Table belongs to me. Only me." For a few seconds, no one spoke. You could hear the clock ticking above the bar. Then Luke's voice cracked through the silence. "That's ridiculous. We've been part of this from day one." I looked at him and smiled. Not cruel, just tired. "Funny, because on day one, you were playing poker." Mom's face went pale. "Emma, that's not fair." "Oh, I agree," I said. "It wasn't fair when you told everyone I was wasting my time. It wasn't fair when Dad laughed at my business plan. Or when Luke took credit for my work to impress a girl at the gym. But sure, let's talk about fair." Dad pushed back his chair. "You don't talk to your parents like that." I leaned forward. "Then maybe you should have acted like parents." The silence after that felt like a vacuum, heavy, swallowing everything. Finally, Luke muttered, "You're just full of yourself." I almost laughed. Maybe, or maybe I'm just finally full of something that isn't your doubt. I took out one last envelope and slid it across the table. "That's for you, Mom, a gift card. Good for dinner here, any night you actually decide to show up." She didn't touch it. I stood, smoothed my apron, and said, "Enjoy dessert. It's on the house." Then I walked away, past the kitchen, past the staff, who watched with proud little smiles. I stepped outside into the cold night air, the same alley where I'd cried months before. But this time, I wasn't crying. I was laughing. That laugh that comes from freedom. Inside, through the window, I saw them still sitting there, silent, awkward, small. And for the first time, they finally looked like guests. Not ghosts. Guests. That dinner didn't just change everything for them. It changed me. Because sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's finally being too far ahead for them to ever catch up. The night after that dinner, the restaurant felt different. Quieter. Not empty, just peaceful, like the ghosts had finally left. I sat at the same corner table where they'd once left me waiting and thought, so this is what silence feels like when it's finally yours. No explaining, no defending, no begging to be understood. Just peace. They didn't call me for a while after that. Not a word from Mom, not a guilt text from Luke, nothing. And weirdly, it didn't sting the way I thought it would. I guess when people stop pretending to care, what's left is clarity, not pain. A week later, my sous chef, Hannah, found me cleaning a prep station after midnight. "Chef," she said, "you know we have a cleaning crew for that, right?" I smiled. "Yeah, I just needed to remember what hard work feels like when it's mine." She nodded, then said softly, "That dinner you had, we heard what happened. You handled it like a boss." I laughed, more like a ticking time bomb that finally learned to use words instead of fire. But she wasn't wrong. Something had shifted in me that night. Not anger, not revenge, just freedom. A few days later, the town newspaper ran a feature on the Harbor Table group. Elliot and I did a joint interview. Well, mostly him. He called me the heart of the operation, said I was the kind of leader the food world needs. It was surreal seeing my name printed like that, right next to his. Then I got a call, from my mom, of course. She left a voicemail. "Hi, honey, we saw the article. So proud of you. Maybe we could..." I deleted it halfway through, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes, cutting people off isn't cruelty. It's self-respect. Luke, on the other hand, didn't handle the silence so well. He started dropping by unannounced, trying to act casual. Just checking in. One afternoon, he even brought a buddy from his gym, some wannabe entrepreneur, and asked if I could mentor them on running a small business. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Luke, you don't need my mentorship. You need humility." He laughed, like it was a joke, but his eyes didn't. The thing about people like him, they can't stand watching you thrive without them. It makes them realize they were never part of the equation. Meanwhile, Elliot and I launched the second restaurant in Portland. Opening night was electric, full of strangers who actually believed in the dream. Not because of bloodlines, but because of effort. I stood in that new dining room, surrounded by my staff, and thought about the irony. I used to beg my family to show up. Now I had an entire team that chose to. One night after service, Elliot and I sat outside by the loading dock, eating leftover pies straight from the tin. He asked, "You heard from them?" "Not really," I said. "Luke's trying, Mom's pretending, Dad's, well, Dad." He nodded. "You okay with that?" I took a deep breath, watching the steam from my coffee fade into the cold night. "I think so. I used to want closure. Now I just want distance." He smiled. "Distance is underrated, gives you perspective." A few weeks later, I saw my mom again, by accident, at the grocery store. She froze when she saw me, holding a bag of frozen peas like it might explode. Then she smiled that practiced smile of hers. "Emma, you look so successful." I almost laughed. "That's one way to put it." She nodded quickly. "I was thinking maybe we could come by the restaurant again, for family dinner." For a split second, the old version of me almost said yes, the one who still wanted them to change. But I'd learned something important since that night. Not every story needs a sequel. So I smiled, warm, polite, final. "You should. It's open to the public. Anyone's welcome." Her face dropped just a little, but she nodded. "Of course, we'll stop by." We both knew she wouldn't. I went home that night and found an old photo buried in a drawer. Me at 19, holding my first knife set, grinning like a fool. Behind me, my dad looked bored, my mom was on her phone, and Luke wasn't even in the frame. I stared at it for a long time, then quietly tore it in half. Not out of anger, but release. Because that girl in the picture, she'd spent too long waiting for applause from people who couldn't hear the music. Now I clap for myself. A few months later, the Harbor Table made it onto a national top 50 restaurants to watch list. My inbox exploded. Investors, food critics, even old classmates who'd once called me the kitchen dropout. Everyone wanted to reconnect. Everyone except my family. And somehow that was poetic, because success isn't just about who's watching when you rise. It's also about who fades out of the frame. The night we got the award, the staff surprised me with a toast. Hannah stood up holding her glass and said, "To Chef Emma, for teaching us that family isn't who raises you, it's who stands beside you when you fall." I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just smiled, the kind of smile that feels like a new beginning. When everyone left, I stayed back, alone in the quiet dining room. Same as that first night. Only this time, the silence wasn't lonely, it was sacred. I walked over to that corner table, my family's table, and finally cleared it myself. Folded the napkins, blew out the candle. Then I whispered, "Thank you for not showing up." Because if they had, I might have never learned how to stand alone. People always say success is loud. They're wrong. It's quiet. It's that soft kind of quiet that sneaks up on you at 2 a.m. when the world finally stops demanding something from you. When you realize the noise that used to come from other people's opinions has turned into something else, your own peace. I used to think closure meant hearing "I'm sorry." But sometimes, the closest you'll ever get to an apology is silence, and learning how to live with it. A few months after the award, I took a road trip up the coast. Just me, the ocean, and an old pickup that barely made it past 60. I stopped at random diners, talked to strangers who had no idea who I was. It felt good, no expectations. No Chef Emma Rivers, founder of the Harbor Table, just Emma. Somewhere near Cannon Beach, I met an older woman running a roadside cafe. Small place, maybe 6 tables, everything smelling like cinnamon and coffee grounds. She told me she'd owned it for 40 years. When I asked if she ever thought of expanding, she smiled and said, "Honey, not everything worth loving needs to be bigger. Some things are perfect, just being enough." That stuck with me, because for the first time, I realized I didn't have to keep proving myself. The battle was never really against my family. It was against that little voice they planted in me that said, "You'll never be enough." A few weeks later, I went back to the restaurant. It was a slow night, rain tapping against the windows, kitchen half asleep, jazz humming low through the speakers. I sat at the bar, no apron, no title, just me. Hannah came over with 2 cups of tea and said, "You know, Chef, I think people love this place because it feels like home." I smiled. "That's the goal." She grinned. "Then I guess you did it." After she left, I looked around the room, the warm lights, the laughter, the sound of silverware clinking, and thought about how strange life can be. You spend years chasing love in the wrong places, begging people to see your worth, and then one day, you build a world where you don't need their permission anymore. And that's when I realized something. Forgiveness isn't about letting them back in. It's about letting yourself move on. I forgave them in small ways. When Mom finally came by one afternoon, ordering takeout like a stranger, I packed her meal with extra bread. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed to know I could do kindness without losing myself again. She didn't say much, just thanks, and that was enough. Dad sent a birthday card that year. First one in over a decade. No gift, no big words, just a line. "Proud of you, kid." I didn't respond, but I didn't tear it up either. I just tucked it in a drawer. Some things don't need closure. They just need a quiet ending. And Luke? He still pops up sometimes, commenting on my posts, pretending we're close. I don't hate him. I just don't owe him the version of me he ignored. People ask me now what I'd say if I could go back and talk to that girl. The one standing in an empty restaurant, waiting for a family that never came. I think I'd tell her this. They didn't show up because your light scared them, but one day, that same light will guide you home. I guess that's the funny thing about ghosts. They haunt you until you learn to stop looking for them. Then suddenly, they disappear. These days, when new chefs ask for advice, I always tell them, learn to clap for yourself, because if you wait for others to do it, you'll miss your own standing ovation. Sometimes, after the rush of dinner service, I walk down to the beach behind the restaurant. The tide glows faintly from the pier lights, the air thick with salt and quiet. I'll stand there barefoot in the sand and think about everything I lost and everything I found because of it. If my story has a moral, it's not about revenge or proving people wrong. It's about learning that being underestimated is a gift, because it forces you to build strength in silence. And one day when the noise fades, all that's left is your truth. I still keep that corner table in the restaurant. It's not for them anymore. Now it's reserved for anyone dining alone. Every night I make sure it has fresh flowers and a candle. Some people think it's just good hospitality, but to me, it's a promise that no one will ever feel invisible here. Because once upon a time, I was that empty seat. Now I'm the one lighting the candle. At the end of it all, I learned something I wish someone had told me years ago. Love doesn't mean loyalty when it costs you your peace. Sometimes, the people who should cheer for you the loudest are the very ones who'll stay silent when you rise. And that silence, that heavy, echoing kind, isn't always punishment. It's a test. It asks, will you stop shining because no one's watching? I used to think strength meant forgiving too quickly or trying to keep everyone happy. Now I know it's about drawing a line, even when your voice shakes, because you can't grow if you're still watering the weeds that once choked you. True family, true connection, isn't defined by blood, but by presence, respect, and effort. You can't change people who refuse to see you differently, but you can choose to see yourself clearly, maybe for the first time. Life has this funny way of balancing things out. The same people who doubted you will one day whisper your name with envy, but by then you'll be too busy living to notice. And maybe that's justice, not revenge, just peace. They finally reached out weeks later. I listened. I forgave them. But this time, on my terms. If this story touched something in you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from someone to find yourself again? I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because here, every story reminds us that healing is possible, and dignity never goes out of style. Wherever you are tonight, I hope you find your quiet, the kind that feels like coming home.